Dilophosaurus. The reboot. Let's talk about an injustice. Why do some dinosaurs, like the T-Rex or Triceratops, become global superstars, while others, just as cool, are left on the sidelines? It seems it's not about how awesome they were in real life, but how they were portrayed in the movies. And today, we're going to correct one of the most glaring cinematic mistakes. We're talking about a dinosaur you probably already know, but I'm almost certain you know the wrong version of it. Meet the Dilophosaurus, a real predator from the early Jurassic period that lived in North America about 183 million years ago. If you've ever seen Jurassic Park, the image that probably pops into your head is this: a small, brightly colored dinosaur with a huge frill that spits venomous goo right in its victim's face. This image, like a virus, spread worldwide. Today, you can find the frilled and venomous Dilophosaurus in video games, toys, models. It's as if its true self was erased and replaced by this fantastic myth. But here's the biggest irony. The real Dilophosaurus had none of these things. No venom glands, no expanding neck frill. In fact, it looked completely different. Today, I invite you to forget everything the movies taught us and dive into the world of real facts. Get ready. We're going to travel 183 million years back in time to meet the real Dilophosaurus. A dinosaur that was not just a predator, but one of the most fascinating creatures of its time. The myth that became reality. Before we get to the real hero, let's take one more look at its on-screen double. It became a true fan favorite, even overshadowing titans like the T-Rex and Velociraptor. Why? It's simple. It was unusual. Its venomous attack, its signature frill that could produce a vibrating sound like a rattlesnake's tail. You have to admit, it's impressive. In the movie, these abilities were explained by scientists in Jurassic Park, adding poisonous frog DNA to the dinosaur's DNA, which led to unpredictable mutations. Thus, this fictional dinosaur became not just a predator, but a true monster. Remember that iconic scene from the first movie where the Dilophosaurus mercilessly spits venom directly into poor Dennis Nedry's eyes, turning him into an easy meal? Scary, right? And it left such a deep impression that this image now seems like the only correct one. But as I said, it's pure fantasy. There is no scientific evidence for venom glands or neck frills. Unfortunately, this fiction is so deeply embedded in our consciousness that even some museums and theme parks feature reconstructions with bright frills. And even in the world of Dungeons and Dragons, the Dilophosaurus is depicted with its characteristic neck frill and the ability to spit poison. This example shows how easily a fictional image can permeate popular culture and become the truth for many. That's the main problem. The myth became so familiar that it completely eclipsed reality, and the real Dilophosaurus was so much more interesting. The real Dilophosaurus. What was it like? Our hero today was very different from its cinematic counterpart. Let's truly imagine it. It was one of the first large predators of its time. You might think it was small because it was shown that way in the movie. But in reality, the largest specimen found reached almost 7 meters in length from the tip of its nose to the tip of its tail, while smaller individuals were just over 6 meters. This, by the way, is significantly larger than its movie version, although usually exaggerations work the other way. Think about that. The Dilophosaurus was the largest known terrestrial predator of its time in North America. It was slender and agile, which made it a perfect hunter. Its build resembled that of an athletic sprinter, capable of quickly and cleverly pursuing prey. Its skull was quite large, but surprisingly fragile. The narrow, blade-like teeth lining its jaws leave no doubt it was a carnivore. But here's an interesting detail. Its jaws weren't as powerful as, for example, a T-Rex's. Because of this, paleontologists long debated its hunting habits. The crests, weapon or decoration? The most striking feature of the Dilophosaurus, of course, was its two bony crests on its head. These crests, running parallel to each other from the snout to just above the eyes, curved and grew taller towards the back of the head. They were formed by the nasal and lacrimal bones. This leads to the most fascinating question. What were these crests for? Early theories suggested they might have served for thermoregulation, helping the dinosaur control its body temperature. The crests were clearly not weapons. They were too fragile to be used like horns or domes, as with other animals. Later, paleontologists came up with a more compelling idea. The crests served for mating displays and attracting a mate. Imagine a male Dilophosaurus. Like a modern peacock, it likely had brightly colored crests. It would have shown them off to females during the mating season to display its strength and health. The brighter and larger the crests, the more attractive the mate. It was a kind of prehistoric business card that helped females choose a partner. The hunting puzzle: scavenger or predator? For a long time, scientists couldn't agree on what the Dilophosaurus ate. Because of its fragile skull and less than powerful bite, some paleontologists suggested it was a scavenger, or that it used its limbs to tear and kick its prey. However, the well-known American paleontologist Robert Thatcher refuted this theory, stating that the Dilophosaurus's elongated neck and sharp teeth would have been perfectly sufficient for hunting on its own. Further research confirmed his words. It was determined that the animal was not a scavenger and that its snout was better suited for precise strikes than previously thought. This led to the hypothesis that the Dilophosaurus could have hunted animals the size of prosauropods, the ancestors of later sauropods. The Dilophosaurus's skull also had a raised chin, which would have allowed it to better grasp and hold on to prey. And while the skull was fragile, its bite was strong enough to capture and kill its victims. There was even a theory that the Dilophosaurus could have used its jaws like a set of knives, slicing and dicing prey until it died. But it was later concluded that this would have been an ineffective way to kill large prey, and the Dilophosaurus most likely hunted smaller animals, small herbivorous dinosaurs, and other reptiles. Even more interestingly, scientists discovered it might have been piscivorous, or fish-eating. The tips of its jaws were expanded, which allowed the teeth to interlock. A similar structure is seen in dinosaurs that we know for certain ate fish, such as the Spinosaurus. It's plausible that the Dilophosaurus may have stalked waterways, much like a heron, and caught fish with its long, blade-like teeth. But then, everything changed again in 2018 when the fossilized remains of the sauropod Thechodontosaurus were found in northeastern Arizona. The bones of this dinosaur were covered in tooth marks that could only have been left by a predator the size of a Dilophosaurus. How could this be if its jaws were considered fragile? In 2020, paleontologists Marsh and Rowe published a study suggesting that while the Dilophosaurus likely ate fish and small animals, the articulations between the different parts of its skull where its teeth were located allowed for much more movement than previously thought. Thus, the jaw was stronger and could deliver more deadly bites. In 2021, paleontologist Matthew Brown confirmed that these findings meant the Dilophosaurus could indeed puncture bones, and it was not a scavenger. On the contrary, it was one of the first apex predators, with no natural enemies and a deadly bite that complemented its agile and lightweight build. The story of a discovery, the path to truth. Now that we know what the real Dilophosaurus was like, let's figure out how it was discovered in the first place. The story of its discovery is a real adventure. It all started in 1942 when paleontologist Charles Alfred Camp from the University of California Museum of Paleontology led an expedition to Arizona. Working alongside local Navajo people, they discovered 3 dinosaur skeletons in shale formations. One was nearly complete, the second was badly damaged, and the third was almost unrecognizable. So the main focus was on the first specimen, which was carefully extracted from the ground, covered in plaster, and sent to the museum. The paleontologist Juan Langston was the first to carefully study these remains, which were frozen in the classic death pose, with the neck and tail arched backward, as if the dinosaur in agony was trying to look at its hind legs. Samuel Wells, who later continued the research, initially assigned it to the genus Megalosaurus, naming it Megalosaurus wetherilli, in honor of John Wetherill, a Navajo consultant who helped with the excavation. After further study, Wells decided that this dinosaur was too different from Megalosaurus to be in the same genus. Instead, he named the dinosaur Dilophosaurus wetherilli, which is Greek for two-crested lizard because of its striking crests. But that's not the end of the story. In 2001, paleontologist Robert Gay found 3 more Dilophosaurus specimens. It turned out these fossils had been found many years earlier and were stored in the collections of the Museum of Northern Arizona. The new finds included elements that were missing from the first 3 dinosaurs: a complete pelvis and parts of the rib cage. The most valuable discovery was a juvenile specimen, one of the earliest dinosaur babies found in North America, which gave scientists valuable information about growth rates and the differences between young and adult individuals. Venomous dinosaurs. Myth or reality? And what about venom? We already know the Dilophosaurus didn't have it, but were there any venomous dinosaurs at all? You might be surprised to learn that one species has been studied for that possibility. The Sinornithosaurus, a small dromaeosaur found in China in 1999, is the only dinosaur that some scientists believe might have had a venomous bite. The team of Yugong, who studied the Sinornithosaurus's skull, noted the unusually long and curved teeth in the upper jaw. These teeth had grooves on their outer surface, a feature of many modern venomous animals. A tiny cavity right above these teeth could have been evidence of a possible venom gland that would have injected a toxic substance into the fangs. Gong's team proposed that this was a venomous dinosaur that hunted small animals, paralyzing them with potent venom, similar to what snakes do today. However, in 2010, another team led by Federico Giannini challenged this idea. They pointed out that the teeth, which were initially described as abnormally long, were actually just displaced from their sockets during fossilization. They also couldn't find convincing evidence of venom glands above the teeth, only finding holes and sinuses that are present in any other dromaeosaur. The debate continues. Gong responded in the same journal, providing more of his data. He noted that many theropods did have grooved teeth and suggested that venom might have been a primitive archosaur trait that was retained in dinosaurs like Sinornithosaurus. But even Gong admitted that Sinornithosaurus might not have been venomous based solely on the grooves in its teeth, as many non-venomous animals, such as baboons, have them to help them chew a variety of foods. To this day, the evidence suggests that dinosaurs were unlikely to be able to produce and use venom. It's still an interesting but unproven idea. But we can be certain of one thing. The Dilophosaurus can be confidently placed in the non-venomous category. Habitat. And now, let's imagine where and how our hero lived. The Dilophosaurus's home was the Kayenta Formation in North America. During the dinosaur's life, this area was primarily a river system with freshwater streams cutting through the land. Imagine it. Lush conifer forests covered most of the region, while ferns and ginkgo trees grew along the riverbanks. The seasons were dry, and during the hottest periods, sand dunes would appear, creating a striking contrast between the green forests and yellow sands. The Dilophosaurus shared its home with many other species, Massospondylus and Coelophysis, 2 smaller theropods that were likely its competitors. Scutellosaurus, an early thyreophorine and possibly an ancestor of the heavily armored ankylosaurs, also roamed these lands. Small mammals, Some of the earliest scurried through the forest, while fish and amphibians lived in the slow-moving rivers. For most of the year, it was a lush and green world, full of life, where the Dilophosaurus was king. In conclusion, the Dilophosaurus is a great example of how popular culture can distort scientific facts. And while the world knows it as a venom-spitting monster, the reality was much more complex and intriguing. It was one of the first large dinosaurs to achieve apex predator status in the early forests of North America. And it didn't need any corrosive venom or extravagant frills to become one of the most successful carnivores of its era. Its story is one of evolution, survival, and triumph, and it's far more interesting than any Hollywood script. I hope you found this as interesting as I did. See you next time.